Check, check. Good morning.
Good morning, Glenn. How are you?
Morning.
I'm well. Trust everyone is doing okay.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day. Today is Mother's Day.
Yes, well, yesterday for us in New Zealand, but yes.
What, Easter Day?
We had it yesterday, yeah, Sunday. Today's Monday for us.
Yesterday.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a really nice day.
Yeah, very nice. The weather is great.
Beautiful.
What can we ask for?
Self-realization.
Right.
Not too much to ask.
Yeah, I know.
All right, we've gone the half hour. Let's begin. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadidhamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So we are continuing with chapter 21 of the Vedanta Treatise, and we're currently, let's just flick back, we're currently in this section entitled Characteristics of Self-Development. So having described this state of self-realization in some of the previous sections, he's now talking about the characteristics of self-development. So self-realization is the absolute goal that we can strive towards. Self-development constitutes the relative steps on the way to that goal. And so it's important that we have self-development goals as a way of changing the lens through which we view our experiences, and as a way of directing our energies and our attentions towards incremental improvements in the personality. And they culminate in self-realization. So last week we started with self-sufficiency, and this week we're getting into universal love. But before we get in, are there any questions on anything at all that anyone would like to take up?
Glenn, how do I explain what Vedanta is if it comes up in a conversation?
Often I say that it depends upon the context. It depends upon who you're talking to. So for example, if you're speaking to someone who themselves has a self-development or a spiritual practice, then you can speak in those terms and talk about Vedanta as a spiritual tradition that has a set of principles and practices for your self-development and ultimately your enlightenment.
What if it's merely a general question? You don't know that person really well, and you want to give them, you don't want to, be totally incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, then I would simply say that it's a philosophy based on an ancient tradition, the texts being some 2,000 to 5,000 years old. It's a subjective science. It's one of the ways that the Vedanta Treatise actually talks about it. It's a subjective science. So science is the field of inquiry, making the unknown known. Biology is applied to living systems. Physics is applied to physical matter, chemistry to chemistry and to chemical processes and so forth. Sociology and all the different sciences, The thing that marks Vedanta as different is the field of inquiry. So all of those sciences have as their field of inquiry the external. Whereas Vedanta investigates and attempts to make known the internal. Now, I don't mean the psyche here. That's psychology, the science of the psyche. What we're talking about is something more internal than that. In fact, you can call the psyche still external. What this is describing is the inner self, your true identity. So it's a set of principles and practices, like any science is. It's an attempt to make the unknown known, like any science, and it proceeds through the scientific method. But the thing that you're trying to uncover is your true identity. Who am I really? So it's a set of principles and practices that allow us to apply the scientific method of understanding the subject. So this is what we've got a subjective science. To sort of expand on that phrase, the experiences that we have, all of them, are born when two things meet, subject and object. Now, the object is the world around us, the living beings that we interact with, the environments and circumstances. We can even go so far as to talk about our own physical bodies as an external thing that we relate to, so too our emotions and thoughts. They can be considered things that we relate to. They are the objects. In order for the objects of the world to become objects of experience for us, there needs to be a subject. I am the subject of all of my experiences. Who is that subject? What is it? How does it arise? What is its role? Coming to know that is the practice of Vedanta, and in fact that is spirituality. So the section that we're currently in is relevant here because it's important to understand that that path follows the trajectory of self-development. So another way that you can respond to the question, what is Vedanta? You can say it's a set of principles and practices for reducing ego and selfishness. And that too would be a description of spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other queries or questions? As always, the chat box is there, so feel free to use it as you wish, and also the mic, jump on at any time. Right, so we're up to universal love. So the first one that we touched on last week was self-sufficiency. So self-sufficiency and universal love go hand in hand, or if you like, they're opposite sides of the coin. When we talk about self-sufficiency, it's that capacity to be with yourself. So another word that we sometimes use here is autonomy. It's that capacity to be okay without having to connect yourself to the external world. Your sense of well-being, your satisfaction, your sense of identity is not reliant on something outside you. You're autonomous. You can make your own decisions. You draw information from outside you to make decisions, but the decision-making process and the conclusion you arrive at is your own. So it's a sort of intellectual, emotional, and spiritual autonomy. But like all of these qualities that we're looking at here, they're not absolute. They're all still relative, which means they exist with a complementary opposite. And so autonomy as a positive thing, as we've just been describing it, can take on egoistic overtones. Like all positive qualities, if we go too deep into them, or if we get too involved in them, they start to become negative. And so the question we can ask ourselves is, well, how does that apply to autonomy or to self-sufficiency? What does it mean for autonomy to go too far and to start being counterproductive to our well-being? What sort of words would you use to describe autonomy that's gone beyond its scope?
Self-absorbed or egotistic, sorry.
Yeah, self-absorbed. We become isolated. It's one thing to say genuinely, I'm okay on my own, but you can use those same words, I'm okay on my own, and have them actually be not true, or have them be a way of not engaging with the troubling, difficult world around us. And you take a simple example of relationships. You have a couple of romantic relationships and they crash and burn, and so you learn your lesson. You think, it's too hard, it's too tough, so I'm going to isolate myself. I'm not going to get into that field of life because it's too troubling for me to deal with. But I don't say that out loud. I don't say that to myself even. I adopt a spiritual tradition and say, no, I'm self-sufficient. I'm okay. I don't need anything. I've just got me and the Atman. So self-sufficiency can become a sense of isolation, disconnection, dissociation from the world and from ourselves, with the guise of spirituality or growth. And so the balancing pole of self-sufficiency is where we're up to now, universal love. So autonomy is balanced with, say, communion. Like that's a word that has been used by some of the work that's done by Ken Wilber. He talks about autonomy and communion. So communion is that capacity to reach out and to connect. So if I say that I'm fully autonomous, I'm self-sufficient, that's one thing. But if I can't effectively manage my connection with the world, then I don't have true self-sufficiency. I need to be alone. I can't deal with others. Well, that's not being self-sufficient. That's having a need that the external world has to satisfy. So universal love is the balancing pole. It's our capacity to extend our well-being to others, to extend ourselves, to connect. And that extension and that connection similarly has positive and negative poles to it. We're going to talk about both in this. He actually describes both. But that external connection goes too far in terms of dependency. I can't be without such and such a person, or I can't be without company. I always have to be around others. I'm attached. So that communion, connection, or of course here he's calling it love, when it goes too far into being counterproductive, it becomes attachment. So that self-sufficiency and universal love actually fulfill each other. True self-sufficiency has universal love as a fulfillment of it, and vice versa. Okay. So let's get through some of the text, and we can, if there's any questions, we can take them up. Universal love. The love that people claim to have for their near and dear ones is far from true love. Actually, it's preferential attachment, uneven love. You love your child more than any other. How is it that your love is concentrated on your child alone? Think. Your child caters to your personal demands more than others, satisfies your physical, emotional, and intellectual needs, fulfills your self-centered, selfish interests. Thus, the love you claim for your child is all but directed to your own well-being. You are merely loving yourself when you say you love your dear ones. True love is even, same to one and all. Love in its purest form has to be universal, not concentrated in one. Universal love is an essential trait of self-development. Okay, so he gives an example here of that uneven love or attachment, preferential attachment. He says you love your child more than any other. So a natural response to this is, well, of course, it's my child. Let's extend the example out a little bit, or make it even a bit more focused. Let's say you have 4 children, and you say, I love my firstborn more than any other. Why? Well, that was the moment I became a parent. That memory of transitioning from non-parent to parent, such a powerful nostalgic memory it gives me. And so my firstborn, I love them more than the other 3. Okay, now, as you say the words out loud, it sounds strange. Why would you love the first one more than the other 3? Because there's something in the ego that is being catered to by the first one that number 2, number 3, and number 4 don't. There's no nostalgic movement from non-parent to parent. I was already a parent when number 2 came along, and number 3. By the time number 4 came along, So you can see in this example that it's the first child is catering to a psychological demand. Some attachment there is. A healthier way to parent is to recognize that 4 children, 4 love equally. 4 loves. And no love, if another child were to come along, it wouldn't detract from the love that I have from the other 4. So this is the way that we tend to use the word love when we discuss it. What we're describing is the emotional response we have to having our demands met. We treat that person now with some sort of preferential attachment. When they cease to fulfill the ego's demands, the love turns off. So you can think perhaps of a romantic relationship again, and one partner is found to be cheating. If my love turns off when I discover that fact, then in the context here, it wasn't true love. It was dependent upon something. It was dependent upon the thought, the belief, you are faithful to me. So anytime our love depends upon something, then we can call it that preferential attachment. So love is different from the profile of emotions that you might have with different people. Again, go back to the example of your kids. You have 4 children, each with 4 individual temperaments, personalities. They've got different traits, expressions. Different types of emotion might arise with the different kids. They elicit a sort of their own fingerprint of emotions within you. Those different emotions don't constitute love. Love is the sense of connection. It's that open channel between the two of us. And the emotions then play within that channel. So anger and love can coexist. Again, ask a parent. I can be angry at you, but that doesn't violate the connection, the love I have for you. And pride, love and pride can coexist. Love and disappointment can coexist. So love is not a fluctuating emotion. It's a sense of connection, a sense of oneness with. And then other thoughts and emotions and obligations arise within that. So he says, love in its purest form is universal. It's a bit like wearing a miner's lamp, you know, those hats. Wherever you place your gaze, the lamp shines down on the environment. Universal love has this quality. Wherever you place your gaze, that connection, that sense of oneness is there. That's different from the range of emotions you might experience. So you meet a hardened criminal, or you meet a terrorist, or you meet Adolf Hitler. What's the relationship between someone who is highly developed and such a person? There's universal love. That doesn't mean a condoning of bad behavior. It doesn't mean that there won't be a sense of negativity towards some of the negative behavior, but that doesn't violate that sense of oneness. He says Jesus Christ attained that supreme state. His love was unabated in the worst circumstances. When Christ was crucified, he maintained the same feeling. As he was nailed to the cross, his last words were dripping with love. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. So this highlights the way that it works. When there is that genuine sense of love, we don't personalize things. Preferential attachment springs from the ego, the limited, restricted identification with my past, my present, my future, with my body, my mind, my intellect. It's constricted. This is the ego. The idea of universal love is that you don't take things egoistically or personally. You have an objective point of view, which he gets into next. So it's like that situation again. Let's say you're in a relationship, and this could be parent-child, friend-to-friend, spouse-to-spouse, siblings, etc. Someone is angry at you. Now, whether it's legitimate or not yet discovered. They are expressing their anger at you. The more love we have for the person speaking to us, the more objective we are, so we're able to empathically listen without feel that we are being knocked back, without feeling that we're being punched in the gut or head or anywhere else. We're able to allow the words to land on us, the emotions to land on us. We accept them in a way without being hurt. Why? Because we're listening on behalf of not our ego, but our higher self. What it means is that our sense of care and our sense of our interest in the person's well-being comes first. And secondary to that is whether or not the person's right. That doesn't mean we disregard that. We want to make sure that we're not being held accountable for something we didn't do. But your first concern is the person's well-being, rather than am I being falsely accused here? Or how do I wriggle out of this accusation? Well, he's right, but how do I justify it? Our ego doesn't have that primary interest. So that sense of connection arises from the recognition of sameness. Elsewhere in the text, one of the words he uses as a synonym for love is oneness. To be at one with somebody is to recognize a common ground. And again, you can use really relative examples to understand this. You're in a foreign country. You've been there for a number of months. All around you is a foreign language and foreign accents. And then you're in a store, and on the other side of the aisle, you hear someone speaking with an accent from your country. You walk around the aisle, and sure enough, there's one of your fellow countrymen shopping. There's an immediate sense of kinship with that person. Why? Sameness. Same country, same culture, same language, same accent. You take that analogy and you extend it out. Where are we the same? Irrespective of your externalities, your physical being, irrespective of your culture, irrespective of your values, where are we the same? When you recognize that, not just intellectually, but deeply, internally, subjectively, talking about the subjective science, when you subjectively get that insight, then there's nothing you can do about it. Then that connection flows or exists. It's not a flow so much. So despite love necessarily being an emotion, a part of the mind, it's really initiated or sponsored by that wisdom, by that insight. You could say it's a confluence. It's not merely an emotion. It's the intellect is very much involved or engaged or part of the whole phenomenon. What about the love depending upon the condition of one's ability to love themselves? So if I've understood the question, it's describing the love that I might have for someone being dependent upon another person's ability to love themselves. So if that's the question, then it's the same phenomenon. If I'm saying that my love for you depends upon your capacity to love yourself, then there's still a dependency there. If you can't love yourself, I can't love you. You could imagine someone who says the opposite. No matter how much you do or don't love yourself, no matter how much you do or don't accept yourself, that doesn't change my love for you. Again, take the example of a parent. No matter where you sit in your own self-love, self-acceptance, the parent's love doesn't change. As you begin to love and accept yourself more, doesn't necessarily mean that your parent loves you more and more as you grow in that. So to say my love for someone is dependent upon their ability to love themselves still has that word in it, dependency. Genuine love doesn't need that to exist. And related to that is, this doesn't seem to be part of the question, but because it's related, the capacity to love others is related to the capacity to love oneself. And again, what does it mean to love oneself then? You can think of love and attention in this context as being the same. In fact, this is brought out in the film Lady Bird. There's a short scene in which Lady Bird, the protagonist, is speaking to a nun, and she says that exactly. She says, doesn't it seem like love and attention are the same thing? So to love oneself means to put attention on oneself. Again, what does even that mean? Loving oneself in that sense then means the capacity to connect with your inner self, rather than existing solely on the surface. These are my physical characteristics, so this is who I am. Male, female, tall, short, traditionally beautiful or not, strong, supple, good sports person, good musician. These are my internal characteristics: intelligent, creative, narcissistic, shy, anxious, etc. These are still surface. Loving oneself means to delve deeper into the personality and having an identity that does not rely on those. Now, those qualities of your personality, those skills that you have, those temperaments and gifts that are naturally yours, those are things that are yours to carry around. Loving yourself means connecting to a deeper sense of who you are, a truer sense, something that changes less and less and less. And then when you have a sense that this is really who I am, all those other aspects get treated in the same way that you treat another person's qualities whom you love. This is my daughter. This is my son. He's a great sports person, a little bit narcissistic, suffers from a little bit of social anxiety. There's positive qualities, negative qualities in there. I accept the whole lot. I accept all of it. And as it grows and changes, I'll accept whatever comes up, because I see him more deeply than the qualities he expresses. How do you relate to your own personality? Its strengths, its weaknesses, its light, its shadow. Is it acceptance? This is all of me. I'm not going to say I reject parts of me, even the parts that I don't want to be there. I'm going to accept them because it's the truth. This is who I am. How do you get to that state of self-acceptance or self-love? Go deeper than those qualities. Who's the one who claims to own them? Who's the one who claims to be both the expressor and the recipient of experiences? Who am I really? And then some of these qualities are seen objectively. So this isn't necessarily a love phenomenon, but the more that we do have that sense of self-love, and as a consequence we make choices on our behalf for our well-being, in the same way that a parent makes choices on behalf of the child's well-being out of love, the more we accept and make choices for our own well-being, we're showing up for ourselves, we exude that sense into the external world. Someone who loves and accepts themselves, you walk differently. You sit and drink your coffee differently when you have that mental attitude. The things you say, the way you speak, the way you react to the external circumstances, there's a whole dimension of experience now added, which means that they are different. And as a consequence, people will react and respond to you differently. Generally speaking, the more you accept yourself, you exude a sense of that, which means that others accept you. There's a sense of confidence, not in an I'm this way or I'm that way, or I can do this, I can do that, not that kind of confidence. It's a quiet, calm acceptance. And so others will begin to relate to you differently the more you have that sense of self-connection inwardly. Yeah, and in just the same way that you put it this way. Think of someone whom you love. Okay, my cat. It's my cat. I don't have a cat, but imaginary cat. I love my cat. What does that mean when your cat misbehaves? Does something you don't want it to do? There's an acceptance of it. It doesn't mean you let it continue. Okay, the cat's ripping up an important piece of, or a valuable piece of furniture. This is the cat's nature. Cats do this kind of thing. But you don't let it continue, you interrupt it. In the same way, that self-love brings with it an acceptance of what is. An acceptance, so this is my nature. Doesn't mean that you'll let your nature make choices for you. You don't put it in control of the choice-making part of your life, but you accept its existence. The opposite of that is there's two opposites of acceptance. One is to let it run rampant, to loose the reins of control and let all the elements of your personality make decisions without you being there. Clearly not a good idea. The other opposite of acceptance is suppression. We pretend it doesn't exist. We cover it up with other activities, we distract ourselves. And spirituality is an activity which is great for suppressing the negative sides or the shadow side of the personality. I am this, and I am this, and this, and this. I am this. I'm all of it. I'm the whole thing. The good, the bad, the ugly, the positive, the negative, the neutral. It's all me. I'm the whole thing. I'm enormous. I'm not confined and constrained to these positive qualities that I try to express outwards, with maybe a couple of little shadow qualities. My personality is so vast. It contains things I'm not even aware of yet. Yes, I am that. Yes, I am that. Yes, and that. Yes, and that. I am the whole thing. It's deepening that connection to who and what you are. And then, when you can accept yourself, accepting others becomes a doddle. In chapter 6, he takes it further than that. He says your love extends outwards into your family and into your community and into all living creatures and into the landscape, the mountains and the hills and the sky and the trees and the birds and everything. I'm all of it. I'm the whole thing. I am nature expressing in this way. I am the cosmos. And a little part of it is packaged inside this body, mind, intellect, but that doesn't disconnect me from the external. Any other queries before we shift on to our next quality? Okay, so the next quality is, in fact, related to what we're talking about with regards to love, which is objectivity. So I touched on this already. When someone whom you truly love is expressing their anger or frustration at you, how do you receive it? You don't take it personally. You're objective to it. So when we use this word love, implicit in that is this sense of objectivity. I don't think the example is here. No. Okay. So you have again, parent-child example. Young child is bitten by a rabid dog. Now the child is, of course, absolutely distraught. Physically, she's in pain, emotionally terrified, intellectually confused, don't know what's going on. She's incapacitated. You're there as the parent or the adult looking after her. There's love. You feel her pain. You can physically feel that bite on her arm. Viscerally, you can feel how terrified she is. So you're connecting with her. There's a resonance with her experience, but you're not incapacitated. You're able to function effectively as an adult to get her safe from the dog and then to get her the treatment that she needs, while still being so connected with her experience that you are also going through it with her. That capacity to stand apart from what's going on and make choices from that space is objectivity. So the question is, again, where are you identified, or where are you anchored? Where's your sense of self anchored? So if the parent's sense of self was anchored in her own reaction to the child suffering, then she's incapacitated. If her sense of self is anchored outside that, then she is objective to all of that and can function from that place. So objectivity, the quality of objectivity is not limited just to relationships. Objectivity is a quality that comes through in all of our experiences. Is similarly that capacity to stand back and to witness. So the body, mind, and intellect go through their functions, perception, action, emotions fluctuate, thoughts come and go, but you stand apart from them and observe them while you're also in them. Again, this notion of objectivity can be falsely used as a way of pushing emotions away, holding them at arm's length. Oh, I'm angry, but I'm objective to my anger. Well, the anger's come up. I don't like it because, I'm spiritual, so spiritual people can't be angry. So I push it away from me. I sort of disconnect from it and claim it as true objectivity. Genuine objectivity is intimately connected with the experience and also standing back from it. So the example that we use always when we're talking about this is watching a movie. You go and watch your favorite film, okay, it's Heredity, fantastic horror film, or it's Titanic, or Romeo and Juliet, tragic, heartbreaking films. Your mind is going through the raft of emotions, terror, no pun intended, terror, anxiety, loss, heartbreak, emotions that you don't want to experience. You never seek them out, and whenever they're there in your personality, you try to move away from them. But when you're watching a movie, you are intimately connected with those emotions, even though you would normally call them unpleasant. But you're not trying to push them away. You're not trying to run away from them. In fact, you're experiencing them as fully as you can. Someone in the theatre next to you is chatting to their friend. You want them to stop so that you can get fully immersed in the terror, in the heartbreak, in the loss. What allows you to enjoy it in that way is that there's a dimension of your personality that lies outside the whole thing. You can enjoy the roller coaster of emotions. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. So, what does that mean? Add that perspective, that filter. it's like watching a movie, one that is a very real, three-dimensional movie, one in which there's no space for an audience because it's all stage, and one in which I'm a player. So you go through your role of whatever your personality is, express yourself as you are, but at the same time there's an ability to stand back from it. So this grows more and more as we advance in our self-development. He says, an essential quality of the spiritually evolved is objectivity. Objectivity means maintaining an impersonal, detached attitude in life, not being involved in the affairs of the world. Some become involved in amassing wealth, seeking power, name, and fame. Others are lost in feelings and emotions, thoughts and ideas. Ironically, the worst form of attachment and involvement is found among the religious. Those are the ones extremely attached to their creed, who turn into religious fanatics, extremists, even terrorists. Those who are detached, not lost in their own field of activity, are said to be objective. They become a witness, sakshi, to all happenings in the world. Watch the procession of perception, action, and thought go by. Thus must you attune to the real sakshi, the self within. Treat your body, mind, and intellect as your possessions, something other than you. The world can only affect these equipments, but not the self. Resign to the self and look at the world from the balcony of the self. That is objectivity. So again, the idea of gaining objectivity is to connect with a deeper sense of self. Who are you? Oh, I'm a student. Well, that's your current intellectual activity of being a student. I'm a parent. Again, it's a role that you play in life. Your nationality, your gender, your interests, these don't really describe who and what you are. Who are you really? If you had a different set of interests, it would still be you. If you'd taken a different career path, you'd still be you, but just with a different job, with different friends. Who's the you? As you inquire into that and search it out, you are, of course, connecting with it. The more you identify with that deeper sense of self, then, as he says, action, perception, emotion, and thought roll on, roll past, and you can view it like you're watching a movie. So sadness comes into the personality. When we are involved, we react to that sadness in a way to try and push it away, or we get involved in our sadness and go round and round in circles, stuck in it. The objective person allows the natural experiences of the mind to come, exist, and go when they wish to go. So what he's talking about here, the method of developing objectivity, is to connect with your deeper self. Another way to look at the same process is to implement a self-development ideal in life, to have a goal, not in one or two specific areas of life, but for your whole life, of spiritual growth. What are your goals in life? Oh, I want to have a successful business, and I want to have this and that and that. Fine, sure, have all those goals. And I want to grow spiritually. What does that mean? Okay, well, we're talking about it here. I want to develop more self-sufficiency, more genuine love, more objectivity. When you have a clear understanding of what growth looks like, and you have an intention to push through your experiences to gain that insight, to gain that growth, then you begin to relate to your experiences more objectively. What can I learn from this experience? Once again, I chose the kind of partner who acts in a particular way. And once again, I've been left high and dry. Why? What can I learn from this experience? I'm in my workplace, and my attitude towards my work has once again isolated me from my colleagues. What can I do? What can I learn from this experience? What insights can I draw about myself? And knowing that, how can I negotiate my way through circumstances better next time? That question, what insights can I draw here? That's a completely new way of relating to experiences, both positive and negative, satisfying and troubling. We're developing a sense of objectivity rather than taking it personally. Okay, this person's angry at me. Could I have acted differently? Should I have acted differently? Is this who I want to be? Does the person have a point? Is there something that they're saying that I can really take on board and change? Yes, there is. Or no, there isn't. But the point is that asking that question, what insight can I draw? What can I learn from this? Is a way of standing apart from whatever happens to be going on. We become more objective to the world around us. Any questions on objectivity? Okay, the next trait is cheerfulness. Another trait of the spiritually developed person is cheerfulness, which he may not necessarily manifest at all times. A spiritually evolved person is replete with cheer and joy, though he may express it discreetly. However, he maintains that feeling all through life. On the contrary, those who lack self-development, not spiritually evolved, are morose, gloomy, depressed. They suffer from mental sickness. Such people should not contaminate the society with their melancholy. They need to be quarantined to prevent their mental disease from spreading. Lord Krishna is a personification of mirth, of fun and frolic. Though his life posed continual trial and tribulation, opposition and challenge, he was a picture of cheerfulness, effervescing with laughter. Okay, so like all of these qualities and like all of these concepts, they need to be understood within the context of what they're saying. So let's start with this idea. He says people who are morose, gloomy, depressed need to be quarantined as not to contaminate society. So we know from legitimate scientific research that isolation is bad for us. If we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling morose, if we're feeling gloomy and depressed, the worst thing we can do is to isolate ourselves from others. It is almost guaranteed in all cases to make it worse. And one of the most effective ways to deal with an inner sense of, as he says, depression, gloom, is to reach out and to connect with others. So what's he saying here? One of the ways we can understand this idea is to say that we shouldn't be looking to live through the idea of misery loves company. Okay, now what it means is that sometimes you'll find people who are in a state of discomfort internally or doom and gloom. And in fact, they sort of seek each other out. And there's a sort of a big pity party. And so we can reinforce our negative emotions by being around others who are also experiencing it. if we're going to reach out, or when we go to reach out, if we're feeling this way, we're not doing it as a way of, I'm feeling bad, so I want you to also feel bad so that we can all feel bad together. It's being done in a way to lift yourself up. So the choice you're making to move outwards and into community and into connection is actually a way of choosing yourself again. Saying, I'm feeling this way, but I need some help. It's much more egoistic to feel bad and gloomy and to sit in your room and say, I'll be here on my own. That's much more egoistic. It takes effort and it takes a strength to say, I'm feeling this way. I need some help. I'm going to reach out to my network. So there's an element of truth in what he's saying here, only so far as recognize that if you are feeling this way, you don't have the right to infect, as it were, or to try and spread it to others to try and lighten the load, because it doesn't. So he says, those who lack self-development, not spiritually evolved, are morose, gloomy, and depressed. So again, it doesn't mean that if you experience these emotions, you're clearly not spiritually evolved. The mind goes through its natural fluctuations of joy and sorrow. This is talking this idea of being morose, gloomy, depressed. What it's referring to is the involvement in some of these negative states. It's the involvement in some of these emotions, rather than recognizing that, okay, stormy weather's moving in. I can see it coming off in the distance. I can feel it coming. And then, yep, here it is, right in the middle of it. The gloomy weather's going to last for a day or three, and then it moves on. You can be objective to these states as they move through you. What he's talking about here, this lack of cheerfulness, is that when the gloomy weather comes, we actually continue to recreate it. We sustain it by being involved in it. This again is what he's talking about with that idea of don't go and infect others. I'm involved in my morose, gloomy, depressed state of mind. In fact, I'm almost in love with it. There's something about it that I want to continue. So a spiritually evolved person goes through a natural range of human emotions. Now, certain emotions will reduce, diminish, perhaps even drop off the scope of your natural emotions, and certain ones will start to improve and increase. But it's important that we don't say, if I'm spiritual, I won't experience such and such. It implies a knowledge of the depths of our personality that we simply don't have. There is a whole dimension of our personality, the causal body, or the vasanas, that we don't have access to. We don't know what's going to come through the personality. And so we have to accept, in a sense, that we're helpless. I don't know what vasanas lie in there, and I don't know what they're going to look like as they come forward. So again, the problem here is the involvement in. If you can be objective to these darker mental states, they can be embraced. Some of the greatest art in the world has been created from these states. Pain, suffering leads to poetry, music, or art as an expression. Art that sells for millions of dollars. Music that resonates for decades because there's something so human about it. Again, it's not a rejection of yourself. It's an acceptance of the light, the dark, the so-called good and the so-called bad. Cheerfulness means that while these states are moving through you, there's a sense of uplift. There's a sense in which even the bad times are good. Yes, this is moving through me, but in my more gloomy states, I'm naturally so much more introvert. I'm naturally so much more inclined to think about my true self, to think about my true purpose, to think about why maybe I'm not aligned to my conscience. Embrace the gloom. It gives you a mental state that is so conducive for introspection. When you're happy and bubbly all the time, you're going outwards. It's more difficult to have a deeply introspective and self-inquiring frame of mind. You're so happy you want to share it with everybody. It's beautiful, it's great. But life is balance. Go out, spread your bubbles. And if gloom comes along, rainy weather, excellent. I get a chance to stay inside. I don't have to go outside. Gloomy weather internally. Here it is again. Here's my chance to nestle into myself and stay introvert, to question, to look for insights, to tap into those powerful emotions. Here is an opportunity. So there's that trait of cheerfulness still. It doesn't have to look like happy, smiling, bubbly. That's not what he means by cheerfulness. He puts it here. He says he may not necessarily manifest it at all times. He may express it discreetly. So there's a sense of satisfaction, a sense of, here we go again. Another few days of gloomy weather. All right. Again, you can see how you're rising above it. There's a level of objectivity here. So, getting a bit meta for the moment. This is the way to deal with a text. It's easy when you read this to, in a sense, dismiss it as, what, so you're saying if you're sad, you're sick, and you should stay at home and isolate yourself? Okay, clearly counterproductive. This is not spiritual. The question is, what can we find in here that does make sense? What can we see in here that is clearly in the direction of growth? Who do I want to be? And so any text, if it's written thousands of years ago, in a time and a culture that is becoming less and less relevant to today, approach it in the same way. That way of functioning, that law that is being talked about here, it's egregious to our sensibilities today. Okay, but what can I draw from it that is a more universal truth that is aligned to what my conscience recognizes as spirituality? We're using the text as a starting point, not a finishing point. Now, sometimes they'll be the same for you, and sometimes they'll be different. The point here is you're using the text as a way to start to investigate your own deeper truth. Cheerfulness. Any questions on cheerfulness? Any questions on anything else at all? Okay, thanks folks. That brings us to the end. So next week we'll continue with dynamism and the rest as he has on there. As always, appreciate the attendance and attention. We're back at 6 p.m. tomorrow, Pacific time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them through in advance, or you can simply show up and ask, or simply show up and just listen. So for those joining me, I'll see you tomorrow. And for those not, have a great week. I'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Adios. Adios.
Thank you, Glenn.